This ain't just a Toy Story or a boring unboxing. These are the stories of action, toy glory, and world clocking. SH Figure Arts, Black Series are hot toys. And figures with transformation sequences that make noise. Check out the joints and the many points of articulation. We're celebrating the global collector nation. Sit back, relax, and get ready to rock this. Here's the real child.
I am so honored to have my next guest on Shelf Conscious. He is one of my favorite toy YouTubers on the internet. Please welcome Cincy Nerd himself.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you, man. I like I was telling you before we started recording, I'm a huge fan. When I found out you and I are from the same part of the country, I was like, oh, I need to talk to him because I just want to talk about like what it was like growing up in Virginia. We probably went to the same toy stores because I remember there was like Toys R Us in Northern Virginia I used to go to all the time. That I bet you did when you were a kid. So, yeah, welcome to the show and thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me. I'm a little intimidated right now because I saw who the previous guest that you had was on this show, and I have to follow in the footsteps of the absolute legend known as Larry Hama. So I'm just like blown away that I'm the next guest after Larry Hama.
Yeah, he was the opening act for Cincy Nerd.
Yeah, that's crazy. But we were, before we started recording, we were talking about the Hasbro Joe show. What's that officially called?
It's like, yeah, it was Fan First Friday as Hasbro's want to do, and today was like the beginning of Yojo June, I guess is what they're calling it.
Yeah. I saw Larry Hama on there at the end when he was talking about the movie, the Snake Eyes movie, which I'm very, very excited for.
Same.
And I saw Larry Hama on there. I'm like, oh no, I'm following the footsteps of Larry Hama. So then I got the anxiety again, but I'm
not at all.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Actually, to be honest, I was a little more nervous talking to you than I was talking to Larry Hama because I've known Larry for a while now. And so like to him, it was just like talking to my dad, but like I've been a fan of yours. We were talking about this before we started recording is that I've been following you on YouTube for a couple years now. And you know, you're one of the people I watch before I fall asleep at night because I'm checking out the live stream that I missed that you record during the day or whatever.
Nice.
And it's like, you know, my wife was always like, what are you watching people going shopping for? Like, I don't know. There's something like calming about watching people's toy hunts. So tell me about how that started. How did you get started, you know, not collecting, but like wanting to like film yourself collecting?
So it started in like 2015. I was living in Cincinnati and every week I had to drive 100 miles to Columbus, Ohio, because my office that I work for, I do have a regular day job. It's I do work in video production actually, and I had a studio up in Columbus, so I would drive from Cincinnati on the long hour and a half plus drive 100 miles to Columbus, and because it was such a long drive, they would try and get as much time out of me as they could while I was in the office. So I would usually stay for at least 1 day or 2 days, one overnight. So during that overnight, since I was away from home, I didn't really have anything to do. So I would either go to the movies, I would go to Toys R Us, which was still open at the time, or I would just sit in the hotel room and like watch YouTube. And at the time I was watching a few channels, but there was a few guys that I watched. I was watching Shartimus Prime, I was watching P2 Vision, I was watching Seha Man. And Seha Man and P2 Vision were doing actual like toy hunts. They were recording themselves going on toy hunts, which is what I used to do, but I just wasn't recording myself. I was going on the same toy hunts they were going on. So it was kind of cool to see what they were finding in their stores. And sometimes I would see, oh, that actually started showing up at the store. I need to get to the store. So that's why I started watching them. I appreciated their personalities, their character, and I figured, why not me? Why can't I do this? I have all this extra time on these overnights. I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting in a hotel room. I should go right from work to Toys R Us, see what they have, maybe buy something, then go back to the hotel room. I have all this extra time. Why not record what I'm seeing and share it with everyone out there? Because Seha Man's out in California, P2 Vision was in Florida. There wasn't really like a representation in Ohio that I was watching. So I was like, maybe I could be that person to show everyone, hey, here's what I'm finding in the stores. Maybe go out and find it go out and get it if you're looking for it too. So that's kind of how it all started. Is I just became a fan of watching YouTube channels, decided to do it myself, and just it kind of grew from there.
First video ever! That's the thing about YouTube. It almost kind of democratizes the ability to like make a show, right? You don't have to wait for some studio to say, hey, Cincy, would you like to record right? Like you have an iPhone. Like, you're in video production, and I'm sure like, you know, there's a whole other level of like production, but like the iPhone essentially has made it a lot. The iPhone and YouTube has made it easier for anyone and then Zoom. Now you can interview people from all over the country, right? Like you can do these things and there's no barrier to get into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I use like a nice camera for my work stuff, but honestly, I think the iPhone actually records better video. Hopefully my company doesn't hear this and realize, hey, we just wasted some money on this video camera. But I think the iPhone records better video. You can record in 4K now. It's just beautiful video, beautiful audio. That's what I use when I'm recording. When I'm recording my actual videos here and I'm doing like my hauls, when I'm not using this Logitech for the live streams, I'm using my iPhone. A lot of people don't realize that, but it takes beautiful video. So I would definitely recommend, you know, if you're thinking about, you know what, I've always wanted to start a YouTube channel and do something like that, but I don't really have a good camera. Do you have an iPhone? Yes, I do. Well, then you have a good camera. So go ahead, go for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. But I think for me, it's that kind of like relatability to your point. Like when I watch folks go on toy hunt, it's like, I do that too, right? Like every morning before work, you know, you head down to the Target, you head down to the Walmart, just see what they have. And in fact, it's like, it does feel, sometimes I wonder what your process is like. Every time you go, do you bring a camera with you just in case? Because, you know, if you're like me, you probably do the toy hunt pretty regularly and it's always empty, right? Like it's always kind of like, oh, it's the same 5 figures on the pegs. And you're probably like not wanting to record that. But what if like, you stumble down an aisle and, oh, holy shit, there's we can curse on this podcast, by the way, just so you know. You don't have to say frick or whatever, unless you want to. But like, you know, he's like, holy frick, there's a firefly, right? Yeah. Like, that's the kind of thing. It's like, I compare it to like Robert Irwin or something, right? Like, you want to see the animal in the wild. Like, do you bring the camera every time and then just decide when I'm going to actually put it on YouTube?
So if anyone ever runs into me when I walk into a Target or Walmart, I'm usually like this. I'm holding the camera like this, ready to record if I see something. Usually when I'm like looking for something very, very specific and I've heard that something has hit the area, like let's just use, for example, and this will probably be a sore subject for a lot of people, Target exclusives, G.I. Joe Classified. If I hear that Firefly or Major Blood has hit the area, I will literally have my camera out ready to record and show people what I'm finding. Same thing for like the Star Wars Black Series Clone Wars figures. I did the same thing, ready to record. But a lot of times, if I'm just going in blind, if I dropped off my kid at cheer or gymnastics or something, and there's a nearby Target or Walmart, and I haven't like heard of anything hitting, I'll have my phone in my pocket. And if I see something, all right, this is something to record. So that's kind of how it works.
And did you like I know you said, I think on a recent video that you put out, and it's again, this is my bona fides, I'm proving that I'm a fan and I'm a viewer.
Thanks.
But you had said something like you don't like to record in GameStops because there's like a the show is called Shelf Conscious. There is a self-consciousness about recording in the GameStop just because it's small and then like the cashier is basically like watching you record. What did it take for you to kind of get over that when you're walking down like the Target aisle, or was it pretty like, did it come pretty naturally, like whip out the phone and start recording yourself?
Well, one of the things that I always kind of did with my hunt videos is I played music during the actual thing because I am a little self-conscious about talking to myself when I'm by myself. So when I go into a Target or a Walmart, if I'm running solo by myself, and I'm like, you know, oh, here's what we have right here. And then I notice someone walking down the aisle. I'm like, all right, this is going to be awkward. I'm going to stop until they go by. But the thing
Unless that guy's like, hey, it's Cincy Nerd. Can I be on camera too?
Yeah, exactly. But if I have like one of my daughters with me, I have no problems whatsoever recording or talking to the camera because there's someone else with me.
Right.
I don't know what it is. It's just a mental thing. But the same thing goes for GameStop. Usually when I go to GameStop, since it's a smaller store, a lot of times it's just me and the employee working there. And it just feels so weird doing it. So a lot of times I'll just like stealthily pull out my camera and record and then stop. Nothing going on here. And then I'll like throw music over it so I don't have to actually like to talk about what's going on or what I'm seeing.
And especially, I think that's smart in Target because there's always like they're playing some like pop music in the background that I'm sure will show up on the copyright strike if you put it up on YouTube, right? Like,
exactly.
You and I think we said this before we started recording. You and I are probably roughly around the same age, so like came of age in the early '80s and early '90s in terms of like the types of franchises you like, the toys you bought. When did you decide I'm going to be an adult toy collector? Was there like a period where you had like given it up and then came back to it? Or like, I've seen your retro collection, so you have like a lot of really awesome retro toys. So are a lot of those like from childhood, or are those like buying back what you had gotten rid of as an adult?
A lot of those are repurchases because I've literally been collecting since 1980, as long as I can remember. When Empire Strikes Back first came out, I was like, Mom, I want to buy some of these toys, some of these action figures. So, and it's just been an ongoing process ever since. I've been collecting nonstop. The collection, because I can't keep everything because my house would literally explode with action figures. I have to cycle things out. I have to get rid of things that I no longer have like that passion for, so that I can acquire the funds to purchase new things, because I still have not perfected that money printing machine that I'm working on. So, but yeah, I constantly like cycle out the collection so I can buy bigger and better and whatnot, or stuff that I just have a passion for. I think I realized I wanted to be an adult collector when and I wasn't even an adult yet, really. I was like 16 or 17 years old. I wasn't the most popular person in high school because I worked at a comic book store. I had like 3 jobs. I was like a worker bee. I would go to school, have a few friends. I think I had maybe 4 or 5 friends total. And then after school ended, that's when my actual time to shine started. And I would actually go work like 3 jobs to earn money. I was basically like trying to be an entrepreneur as a teenager in high school.
If only they had YouTube back then, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I actually worked at like a wine store. That's where I made most of my money. And then I also worked part-time at a comic book store. And I would actually work for store credit. They didn't pay me any money, but I would work for store credit, acquire product. And with that product that I was buying, I would actually set up at shows and be a vendor. So that's how I was making like the bulk of my money. I was offering to work for free at these stores for free, where they would actually just pay me in store credit and then buy stuff so that I could sell stuff. So I was kind of like not a flipper, like not an early flipper, but I was literally just buying stuff to make money.
And this was in the 90s. So this was like before, or probably right around the big comic book bust, right? Like
dude, yeah. Yeah, I'm very thankful that I was born when I was born, because I literally got my driver's license in 1991. And of course, what happened in 1991? You had X-Men #1, you had Image forming, you had Spawn, you had Wildcats, Wetworks, all of those big comic books. That was like the boom of comic books. So because I got my license in 91, I could actually drive my car to a comic book store, drive myself, not have to ask my mom or my dad to drive me, and I could buy all that stuff that I really wanted. So it was the perfect time. I couldn't ask for anything more. Sometimes I complain that I'm old and my back hurts, but still, I could not have been born at a better time. I'm so happy and thankful that I was a product of the 80s, an 80s kid.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's funny too, because like it's the 80s stuff that you and I are, I mean, you can see behind me, like it's the 80s stuff that is coming back. You know, we are the core kind of fan base and collector market for Hasbro. And I guess Mattel doesn't really do much anymore, but like, you know, McFarlane and all the toys that they're putting out is really just like, how can we make the stuff from the 80s cool and modern? And that's the rabbit holes I've fallen through like the last couple years, or with you mentioned we'll talk about Classified, because we just came off of the Classified, the G.I. Joe live stream. So
yes,
there's you can see all of the Transformers and even Black Series. It's like, what if we made those Star Wars toys, but like cool, right? Like articulated and like perfect likenesses and everything like that. So we are definitely the core market. I wonder, I talked about this in a previous episode, like, what are our kids going to have nostalgia for 30 years from now, right? Because
I have no idea. Yeah, my daughters, they're into like Barbie and whatnot, but like, I don't know, they're just like it's a TikTok generation, it's a YouTube generation. They collect these things called fidgets now, which are basically cheap little toys, like little frickin' I don't even know what they are. They're like things that just make you. I can't even explain them. That's how.
Is it like the fidget spinner, or is it different from the fidget spinner?
It's kind of like that, but it takes your time to do. It's like my daughter Tay, she actually bought. It's called a simple dimple, and I'm like, what the frick is a simple dimple? And it's literally this little piece of plastic with two rubber things that you push a button on. You push it, it makes a popping sound. You turn it over, you push it, it makes a popping sound. And I'm like, what the hell's the point of that?
So 30 years from now, when Hasbro makes some like classified version of the fidget spinner, that's what they'll be collecting. So I guess you never went through that phase where like, I'm not going to be buying this anymore, and then having to come back to it later. That's fortunate, because I've told the story about how, like, as a teenager, we had a yard sale, and Mom put like literally all of the Masters of the Universe figures that I had in a box and sold it for $100. It was like literally all of it. Castle Grayskull, Snake Mountain, every vehicle. I had like pretty much everything from 82 to probably like 86. Oh. And it's all so gone
tragic
for like $100. Like at the time, it was like, wow, $100. Me, I didn't care because like I'm too old for this anyway. And then like now, I always tell my mom that that box you sold for $100, you could probably get like 10 times that now. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you never had that moment.
Well, I mean, there was a phase when video games started coming up, like when NES came out, because I grew up with like Atari, so I saw how crappy those games were. But like when NES came out, all the kids kind of shifted, because we were at that age too. And it was like 87, I think, NES, Sega Master System. We just kind of shifted. We were turning into preteens, and we were all toy collectors. And then we were like, oh, these video games are pretty cool. And we kind of shifted to video games. And at the same time, I think there was that same situation where my mom sold all my old toys. But at the same time, I think I kind of kept a few. I'm like, I don't want to sell this one. I'm going to keep this one. And I put it aside. I don't want to sell this one. So I've always been a toy collector, even through the points where I've lost. I wasn't 100% invested in toys, because I was invested in video games, or I was invested in comic books. Because the video games and comic books kind of came at the same time,
right,
for me. But it's always been something, and I've always had some kind of collection of toys, no matter what. Even in the days where I was like in my young 20s, and I was really just trying to, I was kind of hunting for females.
with the camera walking around, like, that's rare. Let's go over there. No.
Chase Varian over there. So I would actually, I had a collection, but I kept it in my closet. And I kept it all in a closet, so if I had some company, then they wouldn't see them out. There's actually a funny story. My wife now, Mrs. Cincy, she did not know that I was a toy collector until something spilled in my apartment, and we needed the vacuum, and the vacuum was in the same closet that my toy collection was in. And she stumbled upon it, and she was like, what
all the boxes just tumbled out.
But no, I had like, the walls were just like all action figures from ceiling to bottom. And she was like, what is going on here? So that was like the moment where I'm like, I didn't tell you this, but I'm kind of a collector.
Right. Well, and then now, right? Like she's featured in your videos sometimes. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Full circle. Yep. So what were the lines that you were into, like, as a kid? Because I mentioned, I had Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe. Those are pretty much like everyone our age had those, and Star Wars. But what was your like go-to action figure line? Since you've been doing it every decade, what was your go-to line in the 80s and the 90s, the 2000s, the 2000s? Jesus, those are so many decades. The 2010s and now, I guess. Yeah,
my definite go-to in the 80s was G.I. Joe. That was my thing. I was into everything else. But the thing is all of my friends growing up collected a different line. It's kind of funny how it all worked out. So I had a friend named Nick, and he had a huge collection of Transformers. So we would go to each other's houses. I'd have all the Joes. He'd have the Transformers. So I didn't really ask for a lot of Transformers, because I could always go to Nick's house, and he'd have all the Transformers. My best friend Jason was a huge collector of like He-Man and Masters of the Universe. So I didn't really ask for a lot of He-Man stuff, because he had that stuff. So it was kind of funny how we used like our friend base to kind of have a larger collection than what we personally had, because we were always playing with the other toys that the other kids had.
Right.
But Joe's, I was like the Joe guy. That was what I always asked for. That was what I was into. Partly because my dad was in the military. My dad was in the Air Force. He was a captain in the Air Force. Was never a pilot. I actually found out, not recently, but like I didn't know what he actually did in the military, but I found out he was kind of like covert.
Oh, well, that's why you didn't know.
Yeah. So I was like, holy crap, this is crazy. It felt like a movie, like True Lies, where you're finding out that your dad, Arnold Schwarzenegger, is like a special agent. I'm like, what is going on here? But like when I first met my wife, we were having dinner with my dad, and that was when he revealed what he actually did for the military. I'm like, this is nuts.
Your dad was G.I. Joe, basically.
Exactly, yeah. I always equated my dad to Wild Bill because my dad in the 80s had this mustache, and my dad's name is Bill. So and he was in the Air Force, and Wild Bill was the helicopter chopper, so he flew things. But I was like, that's my dad right there, Wild Bill.
That's cool.
Yeah, but my brother also served in the military. He was in the Air Force. He was in the military for 20 plus years. So that's why I kind of had like a thing for G.I. Joes. Also, I wanted to be an astronaut because of Star Wars. I wanted to go out into space. So like my backup to G.I. Joes was Starcom because obviously all the like spaceships and space exploration, all that stuff. So yes, I collected Star Wars. Yes, I collected like Mask and stuff. But like G.I. Joes and Starcoms were what really like drew my attention whenever I went to a store.
Right. So when you think 80s, those are the two lines that come to mind.
Yep.
What about the 90s? For me, I had my little like breakup with toys in the late 80s. I'm a couple years younger than you. Fortunately, I had a younger brother. I don't know if your brother's older. I think your brother's older than you.
He's 8 years older, yeah.
Yeah, so I have a 7-year difference with my younger brother. So the fortunate thing is in the mid 90s, or I wouldn't even say in the mid 90s, like Batman Returns, Batman Forever, like I wasn't buying those toys, but my brother was. So I would happily walk my brother down the toy aisle. So I think I had a overt like shame about toys, but in my mind I was so like, oh yeah, let's check out this Batmobile because I always loved it and I never, I think it took me until my 20s when I was like, I'm gonna come out as a toy collector and not be ashamed of it anymore. For me, the 90s is when I kind of went through that. I had my little brother that I could kind of pretend I was shopping for him and not me. And then by the time Kenner came back with Star Wars, I think, what was that, 93? Was that when the Power of the Force came out?
Oh, it was like 95-ish.
95, that's right. It was. I was a senior in high school. And by 95, Batman Forever had come out. And I was all in. Like, I was like, I'm going to buy all the Batman Forever stuff. I really wanted the Batcave that came out with Batman Forever. Do you remember that? It was this massive Batcave. I
do not remember the Batcave, no. In the 90s, I think I was really into like the McFarlane toys. Because like, that's when he launched his toy line. And I was really, really into Spawn.
Yeah.
And those were kind of game changers. Yes, they were kind of statuesque. They didn't really have good articulation, but he was bringing something to the game that we had never seen before, and that was Sculpt.
Yeah.
We had never seen Sculpt that crazy before with that Spawn line. So I was really into those. Obviously, I was into Ninja Turtles too. Ninja Turtles kind of came out in the late 80s, but it kind of bled over into the 90s, and I was really into Ninja Turtles, Spawn, and of course Batman, because 89 Batman is one of my favorite movies of all time. So I was collecting those, and then in the late 90s, that's when Marvel Legends, I think, Toy Biz Marvel Legends started coming out, and that's what I was getting into at that time. So the 90s was kind of like a whole transitional period. It almost seems like 2 decades.
Yeah, it's true. Because it's right. It was the tail end of the 80s, right? So you still had some holdovers. There were still like some weird G.I. Joes coming out in the early 90s. I think, is that when the Ninja Force came out, or was that like late 80s, right? Like I
think that was like 91, 92-ish.
Yeah, like the Pink Joes, and then there was like the Sigma 6 stuff where like I was like, okay, this is I'm done with G.I. Joe. But the 90s, for me, the 90s was very much dominated by like Batman, because like I said, there was the Batman. When Kenner took over the license from Toy Biz, I was all in on that too. So like, but again, for the first half, it was like pretending it was for my brother. And then by the latter half of the 90s, like, no, this is all mine, dude. Like my brother's like, hey, wait, no, like I bought this for me. Because some of those toys I still have. I have a shelf full of Batmobiles. And I have the Forever Batmobile from 95. I have the Dark Knight Collection Batmobile 89. Like, I still have, like, a bunch of my Batmobiles. And like you, like there were, even when I went through the phase of like, I hate toys, I don't want them anymore, I was like, well, let me keep the Superpowers Batmobile, because I know something in my gut tells me this is going to be something that's sentimental to me for the rest of my life. Yeah. So I still have that. I have that from 1984. So I have a few toys that are still like from my childhood.
That's cool.
What about the 2000s then? So you moved from like, you got the 2010s, because you went into Toy Biz Marvel Legends. Mm-hmm. Did you get into like the prequel stuff from Star Wars, or was that a while before you got back into Star Wars?
So like early 2000s, I was really into wrestling figures because I had rediscovered wrestling.
That was like right after the Attitude Era.
Exactly. Yeah. Attitude Era and like the end of the whole WCW thing. Goldberg brought me back to wrestling. Just seeing Goldberg, I'm like, who is this big dude that just walks out, kicks ass, and then leaves? This dude's a badass. I want to watch this guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started watching WCW again, and then I realized, hey, WWF is doing some cool stuff with this D-Generation X. Let me see what that's about. So I kind of fell back into wrestling in like 1999, and just watching a lot of wrestling and going to a lot of live shows, and even getting my brother hooked on it, who had never watched wrestling. I took him to a WWF show in Tampa, Florida. And that was when, I don't know if you're into wrestling, but for anyone that's out there, if you're a wrestling fan, that was when Undertaker's wife, Sarah, had a stalker, and it was a big mystery who it was. The stalker was revealed to be WCW wrestler DDP. So it was kind of a big thing.
Oh, yeah. That was when he was Biker Taker, right? He wasn't even the Undertaker. Yes, he was like Biker Taker. Exactly. Yeah, so I'm not into it as much anymore, but like that period you're talking about, again, my brother and I were like heavy into. We had the Nintendo 64 game. It was like a WCW Nintendo 64. I forget what it was called, like WCW Extreme. I don't remember what, but that was like we played that shit all the time.
Nice.
Like NWO is what kind of got me into wrestling again.
Yeah,
because I kind of like I was into it in the 80s like everybody else, like Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. But then I kind of stopped watching. I missed like the ascension of The Rock and Stone Cold. I didn't like see their rise, but definitely like when they were at the peak, I was all in on like the Rock and Sock connection and but WCW was like where we were. Like my brother and I were like WCW fans, and we kind of like that's the side we chose on the Monday Night Wars, and then eventually it all kind of blended into one.
Yeah,
but no, yeah, that period is like when I was most into wrestling. I haven't really watched much of the recent. I know the AEW is like really hot right now. Mm-hmm. But the toys of those era, like at the time they were like so cool. But when you look back at them, especially compared to like Mattel's WWF toys now, it's almost like it's like looking at Toy Biz Marvel Legends, honestly. Like
exactly, yeah. I mean the figures now, like the Elites and the Ultimates and the AEW figures, they're just insane. I mean, they look like small little versions of the actual wrestler. But like I was collecting in like the 2000s, I was collecting the Ruthless Aggression series. I was really getting into those. And it's funny because one thing kind of led to another, because I was going to a lot of wrestling shows with my brother, and I would go we would meet in Orlando because I lived in Florida at the time. I lived in Jacksonville, Florida, and he lived in Miami. So we'd meet halfway in Orlando or Tampa, and we go to either a hockey game because they have the Tampa Bay Lightning, or we go to like a Orlando Solar Bears game, another hockey game, or we go to a WWE event. And at the time, I remember this distinctly, they had started talking about Star Wars coming back out again. I'm like, what? Star Wars is coming back, episode 1? So it like brought me back. I was like totally into like wrestling and stuff. I was kind of away from like the whole Star Wars thing. And then they announced that episode 1 was coming out. They showed that trailer. I was like, this is insane. That guy has a red face, horns on his face, and a double lightsaber? What is going on here?
Yeah. Classic example of trailer better than the movie, right?
Yeah, that's true. But like when they revealed the trailer, I was 100% into Star Wars at the time. And I remember the day that they announced that figures were going to be going on sale, I woke my brother up. We got up at like 5 or 6 in the morning. We went to a Walmart in Orlando off of like Orange Blossom Trail, and I bought just a ton of Star Wars merchandise for that episode 1.
No, but the contact reader, I remember I got all those. I got all of the Attack of the Clones figures. I mean, that's what really brought me back, because like I said, the Power of the Force, seeing the Star Wars stuff come back 5 years earlier, like that's what really got me back into, like I said, admitting I'm a toy fan. And by the 2000s, I was writing for Toy Fair, so like I had to be into toys. Yeah, I actually have all of my back issues here somewhere that I used to write.
That is so cool, man.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's weird too to think about like toy journalism in the age of the internet, because there's so many avenues now to like get your toy news. Whereas like back then, it was literally like Toy Fair and Wizard Magazine. Like those were the only ways you got information about anything. They were the internet before the internet.
Dude, I think about this all the time. I seriously miss Toy Fair and Wizards so much. Because I worked in a comic book store, and like I collected a bunch of comic books, but every time we got those magazines in, they were the very first thing I read. I loved those magazines so much. I wish they didn't go away. I wish they would come back in some form. But yeah, I seriously miss those.
Yeah, I mean, it's because the thing about what I loved about working for Toy Fair, and I was just a contributor. I was never in the offices or anything like that. But you know, I would. That's how I met Larry. Honestly, like I said in our podcast that this month. Next year will be 20 years that I met him at a Joe-Con in Norfolk.
That's cool.
In 2002. Yeah, it was that. Talk about being nervous. That was the most nervous I think I've ever been in my life when I had to like approach. Because I don't know if you've ever met him in person, like at a show or anything.
I haven't, no.
But he can be kind of ornery. You know what I mean? Like he's he's an older guy, doesn't like to be bothered. And I know because when I've like bring some friends, I'm like, hey, you want to meet Larry? And then I take him over to his table, and he's like, hey, how are you doing? And then my friend will look at me like, I don't think he likes me very much. No, he's like that with everybody. But like that first time I met him in 2002 at a Joe convention, because that, to your point about G.I. Joe's, like, I don't know, like, what you were into as a kid when it came to Joe's, if you were like a cartoon guy or a comic guy or both. I mean, I was both, but I loved the comics so much. Like, talking about being sentimental, I still have a couple of like my G.I. Joe comics that are like in tatters. Mm-hmm. But like knowing that I was meeting the guy who not only wrote those comics, but like wrote each and every one of the file cards that basically gave personality to all of my favorite toys. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was, meeting that dude is like, I can see why you're nervous about following him on the podcast.
Yeah. I absolutely loved all of it. I was a big cartoon fan, but at the same time, when I was a kid, my parents would let me go to R-rated action movies. So, like I was going to like Commando and Predator and all the movies that I probably should not have been going to for the like action violence and whatnot. But I was only like 10, 11, 12 years old. So what I kind of thought about the comic books is they were like the R-rated version of the cartoon. Right. Because the cartoon was very, very clean. Every time a jet would get shot, you'd see the guy in the parachute falling. They'd shoot lasers and not bullets. You'd never see someone like get hit and die or anything like that. But in the comic book, it was very, very gritty and raw. I remember specifically there's a comic book called All Fall Down. It was airborne. Destro's on the cover. It was like out in a cabin in the woods. And it was just very like real. And it felt more realistic to me. So I absolutely loved the comic book so much. And it just kind of brought me like both sides of G.I. Joe, the softer side with the cartoon and the more realistic side with the comic book. Yeah,
exactly. Right. And I think what people forget, I think because most folks, I wouldn't say like most, I don't deal in like real fan or non-real fans, but I think the general public's like idea of G.I. Joe is the cartoon. I think that's the thing that most people remember. Even Hasbro, like when they're promoting their figures, they're using like clips from the cartoon. But I remember like talking about Larry. Larry had nothing to do with the cartoon. Like he was strictly the comics, and he created the characters, of course, but like he didn't do anything with the cartoon. And I know that like people would walk up to him at shows in the past and say like, knowing's half the battle. And he'd look at them like, what are you talking about? I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Because like, that's not me. There was no like PSA at the end of every comic issue.
Right.
Before we get any further, let's dig into a little bit. This is breaking news. Like I said, we're recording this right after the G.I. Joe live stream. Before we get to like your favorite line of the 2020s, I don't know if this is G.I. Joe classified or not. I know that you had quite an affection for that line. But what is your opinion of this line? Because I you know, as you can see, I love it. I do have most of the figures. I had to buy some of them, you know, off eBay because fuck scalpers. But I had to, right? What is your opinion of the G.I. Joe classified line? Because I know like fans and collectors have quite the opinion of that line.
Overall, I absolutely love it. It's my favorite line to collect right now. But at the same time, I get frustrated. I went from very, very excited and happy and just stoked watching that Joe Fest video today to kind of disappointed in seeing that 2 freaking absolutely badass pieces are going to be Target exclusive. So I have learned to rely on a network of people. I've made friends both locally here in the Dallas area that I live now and also nationally so that I can look for stuff for them and they can hopefully look for stuff for me. So if I can't personally find it in the store, I'm going to rely on them and say, hey, keep an eye out for me. I really, really want this piece. But overall, I think it's absolutely amazing. I love the line so much. It's what I've dreamed for. It's what I've wanted. Ever since they started coming out with this Star Wars Black Series line, I'm like, oh my gosh, what if they did a G.I. Joe 6-inch line? What if? How awesome would that be? And now it's here. It's a reality. And I understand a lot of people are upset and angry, but at the same time, it's such an amazing line. I absolutely love it. I feel bad for people that have gotten so frustrated that they have to literally blow up the damn chat during these lives. I feel bad for the people that are working for Hasbro. They're just doing their damn jobs.
Right. It's not their fault.
And they're just catching so much shit from people in these chats. I'm like, guys, Jesus criminy, just lay off these people.
Yeah, no,
they're just trying.
It's like it's kind of like the release the Snyder Cut in a way, where it's like it doesn't matter anything Hasbro puts out. It's going to be like, you know, back before they actually released the Snyder Cut, anytime Warner Brothers said anything, it was like 1,000 replies that said release the Snyder Cut. And it's the same thing, like whenever Hasbro does anything, it's like 1,000 replies of like hashtag boycott Hasbro or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
I mean, there's higher powers behind the whole thing that have set up these deals with Target. So it's a lot of this stuff is way, way, way beyond the pay grade and control of the people that you're seeing on these videos. So take it easy, God. Take it easy on these people.
Please.
They're trying to do their jobs and get people excited for the damn product. So
well, and it's just so funny because like I understand the frustration. I get frustrated, right? And because again, I've had to pay, you know, they a lot of collectors say don't pay scalper prices, but at the same time, if you don't have the network, like you've said, which I think you mentioned in a recent video, which I really like, you know, thought that, well, that's actually really smart to kind of just like make friends basically and have friends help each other out because things are more available in other parts of the country than they are maybe where you live. So, but like I think the consistent thing about the classified line is that it can't be found anywhere. But I've been fortunate enough that like I've walked into a store and I've seen like the Viper and the Firefly I actually bought in the wild without even having to like negotiate with Target employees. It was just like
that's awesome.
Sitting there on the right, like talking about the toy hunt. Like that's one of those things where it's like I wish this was on camera because it's like you see it and you're like you're looking around like, am I on Punk'd? Is it really sitting there? And then you grab it and like, oh yeah, and you make sure it's not been figure swapped, right? Because there's always that. It's the line that I've never bought in retail other than the 2 figures I found in stores. Because everything else I either bought it online or paid scalper prices. Yeah. So it's kind of like, you know, what do you do? Because like I wanted to continue, but I think to your point, the company can only do so much without pissing off fans. But if they can continually piss off fans because of the distribution, what's their incentive to keep making the product? Because they are listening. Because if we've seen anything from the live stream today, they're making the figures look more like their classic 80s counterparts. They got rid of all the Nerf guns. They got rid of all like the sci-fi elements. Yep. But they now just the main thing people want is let me buy it. Because that's the crazy thing is like I want to give you Hasbro my money, not some jag off on eBay. Right. Let me give it to you, you know.
Yeah, I've been going off on like different live streams and stuff, and I've just my thing is just make more. Just make more. You have the key to a money printing machine here. You have the fan base, you have the demand out there. If you make more, people won't, the appeal to scalpers will go away.
Yeah.
They won't clean them out. They won't target their bots to buy 10 at a time when it's supposed to be limited to one. If they make more and make them available, obviously don't overproduce, because if you overproduce, there's going to be leftover stock, and then they're not going to order more, and that's how lines die. But I think they understand the demand is out there. I think if they just did something where they could like have a pre-order and like make as many as were ordered. I mean, it's
the pre-order thing is what like trips me out. Is like, how can you have a system in which pre-orders sell out?
Right. Yeah.
They haven't been distributed yet, right? Like, if you use like the comics model, which admittedly I used to work at Diamond as well, that model was not great either. But like, you know, when a retailer orders, the retailer basically orders a certain number of copies of something, and then the publisher prints those copies and sends them to the retailer, right? Like there's a final order cutoff date and all that. And then the retailers are kind of like basing that on their customers. Like they know, oh, my customers will want issue number 17 of this comic book, or like detective number 770,000 or whatever.
Right.
Let me order this X number of copies. It should be the same thing. And then it's not like they call up Diamond and like, I would like 1,000 copies, and Diamond says, no, you can't have 1,000. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
That's what I don't understand is like pre-orders sell out in 5 seconds. Like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
Anyway, here we are bitching about G.I. Joe, even though we're like, stop bitching about G.I. Joe on the internet.
Well, I just want the line to continue because I love G.I. Joe so much. It was my go-to line in the 80s. I want it to continue. I don't want people to jump ship. I don't want people to leave because they can't acquire the product. So, yeah, it's frustrating. I love looking at the damn shelves that I have set up here, but it's also frustrating knowing that people are like, F this line, F Hasbro, F Target, F it all. I'm done. I'm like, oh, geez. We're losing people, guys.
Yeah, no,
it's
totally.
like the Titanic.
And I'm playing the violin because I'm still on board, man. I pre-ordered my Roadblock right before we got on this call.
I did too.
Anyway, so before we wrap, I did want to ask, like, I've seen your collection. You know, you do your videos where you show off, like, here are my NECAs this week, or here are my Black Series. Mm-hmm. And I know that each collector has that, like, white whale, that holy grail that they either want now or they want it because they never had it when they were a kid. I talked about on the first episode of this podcast that when I was a kid, it was the Knight Rider 2000 that talked, that came with a little Michael Knight figure that I wanted so bad, and I never got it. Now that I could probably afford the crazy prices on eBay, I haven't paid for it yet. I don't want it that bad. I'll let it drop down. But what is the one kind of like toy that got away?
Probably the flag.
Yeah, speaking of G.I. Joe.
Aircraft, aircraft carrier. It's basically when I was a G.I. Joe collector as a kid in the 80s, I would do my chores in my house to earn a figure. Basically, my mom would buy me a single action figure every week. Occasionally, I would say, I don't want a figure this week, but next week, can I get like a small vehicle? And I would get like, I don't know, like a Trouble Bubble or something. But the only time I got larger or medium to large sized vehicles was for birthdays and Christmas. So the largest vehicle I think I ever got was the Rattler. So I never got any of the giant play sets, never got the G.I. Joe headquarters, never got the, what's it called? The Defiant, the spaceship one. And of course I never got the aircraft carrier, the flag. And none of my friends had the flag. It was just too big at the time. And we never got it. And I live near a store called Dallas Vintage Toys, and they always get flags in stock. I think they have 2 or 3 in stock right now. But at the same time, it is my holiest of grails. I could essentially, if I ever was to acquire a flag, stop collecting. That would not happen, but I always tell myself it would happen because I'm always going to collect.
Yeah.
But it's one of those pieces where there is justification where if I was to get this one piece, I would be happy. Yeah. And I would not need anything else. And that would be it. But I just literally do not have room for it at this point. So even if I had the funds and the availability to get one, I don't have anywhere to put it.
Exactly.
So it's going to remain that white whale. It's going to remain that holiest of grails. And at some point in my lifetime, I will acquire a flag.
That's an excellent. I never thought of it that way because I think it's with me with the Knight Rider is because it's not because the flag. Even if you go to a vintage store, I'm sure it's like the prices are ridiculous to buy like a in box flag that's not even mint condition, right? Like just a flag in box, even a flag loose, I'm sure is like a hefty couple $1,000s. Right. But I think to your point, like I feel like if I did end up ever dropping $250 or whatever on eBay for that, the thing that I always wanted when I was a kid, it's that sense of like, oh, I'm complete now. Right. Yeah. And that's kind of why I'm like, I put it off. I don't actually go and look for it because I know that that's the one, it'll always be, it's like the white whale. It's Moby Dick for those of you who are literary. It's the thing that you'll never attain. And I think that I kind of like that until I do. I'd like, to your point, maybe on my deathbed, I'll be like, oh, by the way, hit purchase on eBay for me. Because I need to have that in my possession before I expire.
I mean, at the same time, though, I kind of don't want to get one because at that point, I'm like, then it's ended. The search, the quest has ended, and I don't want the quest to end. I want it to continue. So, at one part of me wants to get that and just be content, and then the other part of me was like, I don't want this ride to end.
Exactly.
So
that's why you wait till you do it on your deathbed.
Exactly.
There you go. That's the pact we'll sign right now. On our deathbed before we die, just for Cincy, give him the flag, and for me, it's the Knight Rider 2000. There was a couple things I wanted to get into, but I don't want to spend any more of your time. Maybe you'll come back on the podcast and we can talk more, particularly about like hot toys and things like that, because I've recently fallen down the hot toy. I saw you just got Mando. Let me move a little bit. I have my deluxe Mando and my little Mandalorian themed detail. I also want to talk to you about displays, because the other thing that I can't figure out is like, I don't have the number of details that most collectors do. To your point, I have to like decide what I'm going to cycle in and out. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder what like your process is, because I see you kind of cycle like themes of what you display and some things you take and some things you take down. So maybe we'll talk all about this on another episode of Shelf Conscious. But
definitely. Thank
you so much for being on the show. Tell our viewers and listeners how they can find you on the internet.
You can find me pretty much anywhere at Cincy Nerd. You can find me youtube.com/Cincy Nerd, Instagram Cincy Nerd, Twitter Cincy Nerd, Facebook Cincy Nerd. If you really want to do something really cool, you could join a group that I made on Facebook called The Nerd Bar. It's facebook.com/groups/The Nerd Bar. It's where we basically just share pictures of our hauls and talk about stuff that's coming out and talk about if we're excited about it and stuff like that. So it's just a group of dudes that are into the same thing, sharing the passion for the hobby. So
awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.